implemented. The traffic light system is to have a very easy code whereby if the product has a lot of fat, it gets a red light. If there is medium fat, it gets a yellow or orange light. And if there is no fat, no salt, whatever, it gets the green light, 5 kilo. But again, this is probably a simplistic system. There's a lot of surveys showing that consumers don't really understand that. It's too simplistic to put the traffic lights. So again, possibility for the Commission to introduce a more sophisticated system based on the average diet and recommended daily amounts, RDAs, which is something which is already used in Europe by the industry. So again, not compulsory in legislation, possibility to develop it, but also importantly, possibility for individual member states to introduce a national scheme that can be used in the country, cannot be made compulsory, but cannot be used. In the UK, especially supermarkets, Sainsbury's and the likes, they have very sophisticated system for labeling the calories, the salt, and the like. And but of course, they don't want it to make it compulsory because there is competition, if you want, between the retailers, especially not so much the producers, much more the retailers. Sainsbury's, Selfridges, Marks and Spencer, they have their own scheme, and these schemes are quite effective in communicating the nutrition value with consumers. Very importantly, the nutrition declaration will become compulsory at the end of 2016 for pre-packed food. For non-pre-packed food, it's not compulsory because, of course, it's much more difficult to organize. But member states may decide that they will extend the compulsory labeling of the nutrition of products or of some items on a national basis. Of course, for non-prepacked products, there's not so much problem of free movement of goods because those are products which are traded not even nationally but locally. But of course, you might think that the interest of the consumer in knowing the value is the same for non-prepacked food than for prepacked food. And you may have seen, actually I've never checked in Thailand, but in Europe, big chains like McDonald's or Burger King and the like will very often label the calories, the salt content and so of their French fries, of the Big Mac or of the cheeseburger in the paper that you get on your tray. So the nutrition information can be conveyed even in restaurants. It is possible, of course, to label the calories of your meal on the menu. You see that often in the States. So a member state could well make that compulsory, either for all non-prepacked foods or, for instance, in restaurants and the like. As you can see, there is, in this new regulation, there is work for another generation of lawyers and nutritionists in the Commission and actually in EFSA, because all this is also based on research made by EFSA, especially when nutritional value is involved. Additional work on country of origin, on the nutrition declaration, notably on front of pack, on labeling per portion, possibility to regulate on trans fats. So we don't have to go back to Parliament now. We can do it by delegated power in the Commission with the member states. I'm not going to spend much time on nutritional claim because this is not new legislation. This is well established. Other to tell you that there's now a lot of activities, and for those who are perhaps less familiar, what is a nutrition claim? Well, it's typically information about the nutrients that the food contains more than a normal product or less than a normal product, like it's high in calcium or low in salt. This is a nutrition claim regulated in Codex. This is regulated in the annex to the regulation. And of course, now we come with more sophisticated nutrition claims like low polyunsaturates, monounsaturates and the like. We've just added these. We've just added one on omega-3 and omega-6, for instance, rather high in omega-3, high in omega-6. What does it mean? What are the conditions? What is the minimum content of omega-3? Sometimes we even say that it must be bioavailable, that is the core, the body must be able to absorb it. So we define the condition under which you can make these claims. The function claims goes one step further. Because there is a high content in calcium, you can add a claim, for instance, calcium plays an important role in strengthening the bones. This is one of the claims which we have approved based on an EFSA opinion for a function claim. And you can go all the way to what we call a disease risk reduction claim. That is a claim that regular consumption of a certain amount of the food, which has to be indicated, will reduce one of the risk factors of a disease. For instance, regular consumption of calcium may help reduce the risk of osteoporosis. Again, this is one of the very few disease risk reduction claims that we have adopted, that we have accepted. We have turned down, believe me, thousands of claims that we thought were not scientifically substantiated. I believe it's 4,400 and something claims which have been turned down. If you want to see the claims that we have authorized, there is a register on the nutrition and health claim that we have adopted with a reference to the EFSA opinion. I don't remember if this is on the website of the Commission of EFSA. I think it's the website of the Commission. And interestingly, it also indicates the claims we have refused. Because, of course, if you are a producer and you are interested to see whether there is a chance of having your claim approved, you may see similar claims that have been turned down. Of course, we work a lot also on nutrition in general. It's not easy to regulate nutrition, to regulate the content of food. I believe that one day we will do that. We will probably one day limit the amount of salt in bread, for instance. Bread is a very important source of salt in your diet, especially, I must say, in Germany, where there is a tradition of salted bread, heavily salted bread, which is also probably the reason why it conserves better than, say, French baguette or the like. So education plays a lot of roles, so we have an important policy. And it's part of my job when I will be based in Southeast Asia to also help you if you're looking for information or if you're looking for work which has been carried in EFSA or in the Commission on this nutrition. The general policy is called diet and physical exercise because, of course, the two go together. And we very much insist on the fact that it's not just about exercising in the gym from time to time, but also it is also in your daily life. I mean, when I was a kid, I went to school like 2 kilometers in the morning, back home to have lunch with my mom, 2 kilometers, afternoon go back to the school. These days, most kids are brought to the school in car, most likely in a SUV even. And I mean, even bicycles on the streets, you don't see, they're coming back in Bangkok, I must say. But also, yeah, I mean, it's typical, like if you talk to the manager of a fitness center, he will tell you that the single biggest complaint is the parking is too far from the gym, so that people have to, or like on this slide is gone now, but the escalator to walk the 20 steps to go to the gym. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. So labeling is very important especially when it's become mandatory labeling. And also, I think the industry got the news. I'm not sure it's good news or bad news that there's going to be mandatory labeling coming into force. Some in next year, next December, something about country of origin, and also some new formats, new more nutrients for the nutrition labeling, and also the mandatory nutrition labeling in December 2016. So we need to prepare ourselves on this too. Okay, so now it's come to the question and answer session. We have about half an hour for this session. All participants can ask questions. Then you can raise your hand and the staff can give you the microphone, or you can write in the paper too. So please ask as many questions as you like. You can ask in English, you can ask in Thai, so we have a interpretation system. Or even you can ask in Spanish or French if you like, because the speaker can understand the language. So please, just raise your hand. I think there should be lots of questions.
So I'm from Thailand Institute of Scientific and Technological Research. I just have one question about your slide that mentioned about regulation EU 1169. There are two entering into force in 2014 and 2014 and 2016. What is different between two years? Thank you.
So if we can put this, is it possible? Put the slide on.
ขอขึ้น presentation
Okay, thank you. So on 13 December 2014, the regulation 1169 will come into force in respect of the general labeling and mainly the mandatory labeling of the items. So the new requirements on labeling the country of origin, for instance, will come into force. The new requirements on the minimum size of the font will come into force. So everything which is general labeling will come into force. That is, everything except the nutrition labeling is coming into force at the end of 2014. The only thing which is coming into force later is the obligation to have the nutrition labeling, the nutrition declaration on the label of prepacked food. So for nutrition labeling, at the end of 2014, if you are using voluntary labeling, or if you are already obliged to label because you make a claim, you have to adapt to the new format with the calories, the energy value, the fats, total fats, the saturated fats, the salt, no longer sodium, and the protein, everything that, if you use voluntary nutrition labeling, you have to adapt to the new format. So the format becomes compulsory at the end of 2014. But the obligation to label every food with that format is only starting on 13 December 2016. So there's actually only one line in the regulation which comes into force at the end of 2016, which is the obligation to have the nutrition panel on every food. All the rest is coming into force already at the end of 2014, except the obligation to have the nutrition labeling on all food.
มีคำถามไหมครับ so while waiting for the question okay that one
ถามนะคะกรณีของตัว nutrition information นะคะ
โอเคครับต่อ
กรณีของ nutrition information นะคะ ถ้าเกิดว่าสินค้าที่จำหน่ายอะค่ะเป็นสินค้าที่จะต้องมีการเติมน้ำก่อนการบริโภคนะคะ nutrition ที่แสดงเนี่ยค่ะจะต้องเป็น as sold หรือว่าเป็น as served ค่ะ
Okay, this means that for the food, for nutrition labeling, for the something that need to be rehydrated, like the water, like a powder food. So what the nutrition labeling is for the whole food or just the
Okay.
before preparation.
So this actually refers to one of the mandatory labeling items. The sixth one, you see storage condition. This is something else. This is sort of for ham, it says put in the fridge or keep refrigerated and the like. And then you have instruction for use. This is normally not compulsory for all food, but it is compulsory if without the instruction you could not use properly the food. So for powdered products, it says how you have to restore the normal consumption, so add water or add a certain quantity of water or add water at this temperature. If this is needed, then you have to indicate it on the labeling. I don't have my slides with me, I mean the normal presentation, because again, in the UK, you would see that there is very good explanation on how to use the food. Like, for instance, it says if you want to heat it in the microwave, then pull out the plastic, pick with your fork somewhere, and then heat at this power, 900 watts, for 2.5 seconds. These are the instructions for use, because normally nobody would eat a lasagna without eating it. And then it says if you want to put it in the oven, temperature is 220 degrees for 16 minutes. These are the conditions for use. And for powdered products, they are compulsory because nobody would eat the powder without restoring the... So if it is needed, it has to be on the label, it becomes compulsory. And it is for the producer himself to decide what is the recipe for putting it. So we don't put the details in legislation. Each producer has to know how he should indicate clearly how to use the product. And of course, he could be breaching the requirements of the directive if the instruction is not there or if the instruction is not clear. This would become either a breach of the mandatory labeling of the instructions for use, or it could also be regarded as misleading labeling under the general clauses of the directive. Was that the answer to your question? No.
มีอะไรถามเพิ่มเติมครับขอไมค์ทางนี้นะครับ
คำตอบอาจจะไม่ชัดเจนนิดนึงนะคะคือกรณีอันนี้ค่ะที่จะยกตัวอย่างอย่างเห็นได้ชัดถ้าเกิดว่าสินค้านะคะ เป็นเหมือนกับเป็น concentrate soup อะค่ะที่จะต้องมีการเติมน้ำเรามีการระบุอย่างชัดเจนว่าจะต้องมีการเติมน้ำลงไปเพียงแต่ว่าเวลาที่เราจะส่งตัวอย่างไปเพื่อทำการวิเคราะห์ตัว nutrition นะคะเราควรจะต้องส่งเป็นตัวอย่างพร้อมกับการเติมน้ำไปแล้วหรือเป็นตัวอย่างที่ออกจากโรงงานผู้ผลิตที่ยังเป็นตัว concentrate soup อยู่อะค่ะเพราะว่าตรงนี้มันจะส่งผลกับตัวนิวทริชันที่มันแตกต่างกันนะคะ โดยเฉพาะอย่างยิ่งในตัวของตัวโซเดียมหรือตัวซอลต์อะค่ะที่มันแตกต่างกันอย่างชัดเจนนะคะ
Gudrun will answer. Take the microphone and answer. I mean, this is not an issue for the consumer. The regulation only explains if you want the consumer hand. Now you're asking, how do you calculate there is an annex in the regulation which gives some indications. I don't know if that is included because the regulation only includes what is necessary for the consumer. This is different. This is sort of good manufacturing practice or the like, but maybe Gudrun has a better answer.
Yeah. I try as somebody who worked in the laboratory before. So that is the background that you need there. So you will be, I understand you send a sample, a witness sample to a laboratory in order for your importer to know whether your product complies with the EU requirements, correct? Is that what you're trying to? So what you do, you send your original product with what you would like to put them on the label. You know, put 100 grams and puts a liter of water to it, plain potable water. So you send that sample, they will analyze the sample as it is, and they will probably also put water into your sample to do both of it, to really know whether your product, first of all, is correctly labeled as a powder, and afterwards whether it also dissolves in the way that you would like to have it. And then see if you have made any indications of what it has. If you have added potable water, that what it consists of then. That's what you, from the importer's perspective, you would like to know. And as we have water in Thailand and we have water in Europe, you don't have to spend extra amounts of money to send something heavier containing the water to Europe. Also good for the environment, by the way.
There is another clause in the regulation which may help you, which says that when you have to give the quantity of an ingredient, it is the quantity of the ingredient when you prepared the food and not the quantity of the ingredient in the final product. So it's the quantity which you used in making the product and not the quantity which is present in the final food.
Okay, นะครับ Okay, I have probably question to the first one, maybe to Claudia on EFSA. Patrick mentioned about the risk and benefit analysis that need to be done. Then we understand that EFSA conduct risk assessment. And how about some other thing like the risk reduction or the recommendation to the European Commission on different options of the risk management and how to analyze the benefit and risk of different options. It is also the role of EFSA or not?
Okay, yeah, this is really interesting because in some areas, like for example in the feed additives area, I think it's okay, we have to analyze also the efficacy of the additive. So once we analyze the efficacy of the additive, we consider some of the effects of the beneficial effects of using the additive for a specific purpose. However, we are not doing a complete risk-benefit analysis. For the time being, EFSA does not have a mandate to do this work. The panels, as they are currently equipped, they do not have also the possibility to do a full risk-benefit analysis. So we are doing an analysis of initially the safety, but we consider also the efficacy. Giving this information together to the Commission, they have the possibility to take a decision together with the member states at the standing committees for the adoption or for the approval of a certain product in the European market. We have to say that the evaluation of efficacy in the case of feed additives is not so easy. It's a bit complicated because we have made this analysis since several years already with the experts. And we realized that if we want really to use a statistical analysis, a very strong statistical measure for the analysis of efficacy of a feed additive, we will need more than 150 animals per group, and then we will need several groups, several trials. So from that point of view, I think this is not sustainable from an animal welfare, point of view. So what we are doing in the case of feed additives is we decided on a very pragmatic, really a pragmatic approach. We were thinking, well, one study, positive, negative, one study doesn't say anything. 2 studies. Okay, what are we going to do if we have one positive and one negative? Again, we are in a end road. So pragmatically, we decided to have 3 studies for the measure of efficacy in a way of the benefit of the additive for a certain purpose. In this case, we have a normal group of animals, so not so big, that is going to impair also the general market and the general in the EU, but in which we can analyze a bit the efficacy of the product. So for the time being, we do it in a reduced scale, let's say. We consider this in the assessment of the additives, of the feed additives, but it is not a fully risk-benefit analysis as we will thought initially. Probably in the future, as one of the, as this is Patrick's one of his views.
Thank you. So I got the written question, probably to Patrick. The first question is that what is the differences between EU regulation, EU directives, and EU decisions? And maybe one by one.
That's an easy one. The directive is addressed to the member states. It tells the member states, you should change your legislation on labeling in this way. And then the member states will adapt their legislation, and it will remain the national legislation that the operators have to follow. So if there is a directive, like it's currently the case on labeling, the legislation in force, I told you, is Directive 2000/13 currently. So in fact, if you know how you have to label your food in France, you look at the French law, which is implementing the directive. A regulation, it's a much better instrument from the EU point of view, because the regulation is directly indicating to all the operators how they have to do their labeling. So there's only one regulation for the entire EU in the future. From 13 December 2014, member states will have to repeal all the national legislation, and they will be replaced by the EU regulation, which will be the same across the EU. Now, you may wonder, the regulation is so better, why didn't you do a regulation in the past? The answer is we could not, because in the early days of the EU, only the directive was available to the European institutions. And it's only in